Welcome back to the Conference USA Roundtable. Apologies to our viewers for being a little week off of a schedule that we were planned to be on last Monday night, but alas, we're here. Happy to be here with the guys as always, the usual suspects with us this week. But we're going to be talking a little bit about the midweek games that actually started 2 weeks ago. Hence why we weren't here last week, and now everyone's got their opportunity for their first midweek game. I'm sure we all love the late nights in the middle of the week and have to go back to work the next day. But I'll ask the group here, guys, how are we feeling after our first week of midweek?
I'm feeling good. I mean, we're 1-0 in the midweek, and so I'll like it until we lose. So as of now, I'm feeling pretty good about it.
Could be better, could be worse. I'm excited for the road ahead. Obviously, a tough loss to the Flames, but a lot of good to take away from it still. And so now we get to play UTEP in the Sun Bowl. It should be a fun game.
Yeah, same over here. Feel pretty good. Haven't had a conference loss yet, but it really starts to get tough, and every game starts to matter from here on out. So I'm really looking forward to how this plays out.
Right. Well, we'll bounce off what Ben said there. They started off the midweek stuff back on last Thursday on the 3rd, where they trounced UTEP really. Hunter Watson continues to impress. I've made the comment, early in the year, especially the Texas State game. God, what a legacy game that was for Hunter Watson. But Ben, I'd love to hear, who this guy is. I know, again, Conference USA hasn't had the opportunity to play him quite yet to its fullest, but he's a dynamic guy, and I have to say he's got to be a front runner for Player of the Year. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, he's definitely got to be in the conversation. I think someone on this podcast a couple of weeks ago called him the Diego Pavia of this year, kind of a guy that's, there you go, Moff, kind of coming out of nowhere and making a big impact on a team that's playing really well. Guy that went to Arkansas Monticello, a D2 school out of high school, didn't play there, went to Iowa Western JUCO last year and won the national title there as a QB, and just continued to kind of fly under the radar. We picked him up last minute in December, January, and he's just been great. I mean, just really impressed during spring ball. He did have a meniscus injury this summer, so he missed a lot of the summer, and and then some of training camp, got healthy just in time to be able to be the starter. And he's been just what this offense needed after a couple rough years of offense for Sam Houston. 3 or 4 offensive coordinators in 3 or 4 years in a row. And him and Brad Cornelson are starting to provide some stability there and finding an identity, which I think is the big thing. Hunter Watson has really just become a threat with his legs. He can pass it. He's capable enough to be able to throw it when needed. But his legs, he's just super dynamic. And it's really just kind of transformed this offense this year. And so he's been a lot of fun to watch, was really good against UTEP. Then it was really good to get that bye in there, 13-day break, I think it is. And so good to get a bye, get the legs fresh for a big matchup at home on Wednesday against Western Kentucky.
Yeah, I wish MTSU was the same benefactor of the midweek breaks as it seems the entire conference does, because right now we're amidst 3 games in a 2-week span. And I guess the way I look at it now is I think it's better that it just gets over with at this point. Disappointing loss to Louisiana Tech. I will eat crow. I had a lot of optimism after their loss against FIU, thinking that we would be in that same bracket and tier of Louisiana Tech, and all it took was for Sonny Cumbie to finally relinquish his play calling duties to his offensive line coach, and that seems to be the turnaround. It seems to be a turnaround for every team that we faced so far. They make a slight little change, and things start rolling for them. And Kennesaw State, we have coming up tomorrow night. They're already talking about making a change at quarterback, and I'll backtrack a little bit to cover our bases with Kennesaw State and their loss to Jacksonville State, another team that made the change at quarterback, Tyler Huff. Tyler Huff seems to be the guy for Rich Rod, get that Corvette offense going for those guys. 63 points showing against Kennesaw State, something they've been missing all season long. So Jacksonville State has kind of re-entered the chat as a possibility of threatening for that top tier play. And then we'll go ahead and move back into what we witnessed this last week in Conference USA. And I'll turn things over to Jake Gibson here from Paws Up Podcast, talk about his Golden Panthers. I mean, you put the number one team on the ropes for quite a bit, Jake. That was a heck of a showing by FIU.
Yeah, they say that some losses can feel like wins, and technically speaking, that's not the case because we're still hunting for 4 wins to get into a bowl game. But yeah, you mentioned FIU went blow for blow with one of the best teams in G5 and was a touchdown away from tying in overtime, potentially even winning that game. But some decision making, I think, some play calling at the back end of the game kind of went away from FIU. On that final touchdown that the Panthers scored, there was an offsides on Liberty on the extra point. I really felt like instead of going for the tie with the extra point, they should have accepted that penalty, put the ball on the 1, go for 2, and try to win the game in regulation. They didn't. They went to overtime, and it was a disaster there. But all things considered, in some cases, Kewan Jenkins actually outdueled Caden Salter, 19 for 29, 245 yards for Jenkins, and then 9 for 16, 125 yards for Salter. I know Salter was more dangerous with his legs, and I think that goes towards some of the shortcomings that we've known about FIU's defense since the start of the season, that their rush defense has been a bit questionable. I think they started off looking good containing Salter, but as the game progressed and the defense became more gassed, they couldn't do that as well. And obviously, Salter scored the final 2 touchdowns for Liberty, both in regulation and in overtime on the run. But no, I think Kewan Jenkins and the offense had a pretty solid game. Eric Rivers and Dean Patterson have turned into a scary duo at the receiver core for FIU. I still think there are some kinks to work out with FIU's running attack, because they have the talent in Keyshawn Owens and Lexington Joseph. However, it hasn't really turned into much production. They still do not have a 100-yard runner this season. So really looking for someone to really take the mantle there. I still think it's going to be Joseph at the end of the day, but we'll see how they do against a stout UTEP defense and how they manage that. But I think defensively, the FIU secondary did a great job to limit Salter's attack through the air. I mean, they pretty much negated any big plays thrown in the air through Liberty's offense. Most of their damage was through the run, which, yeah, they got 281 rushing yards. It's not a good look for FIU's rush defense, but FIU has historically not really done good against dual threat quarterbacks going into this season. The only other dual threat quarterback they really had to face was Cam Fancher for FAU, and he definitely got his mileage on the ground as well. So it's bottom line, it sucks that we lost that game, but it definitely, FIU impressed a lot of people, and I know they're more motivated now more than ever to know that they went band for band with one of the best teams in G5 and almost won that game, and now they get an opportunity to prove that against the winless UTEP Miners on Wednesday night. So I'm hoping everything goes really well for them, that they can actually flex their muscles.
Let me ask a question on that motivation a little bit. And this is kind of a funny question coming off of a loss. You're now 2-4. Mm-hmm. So you need 4 more wins to become bowl eligible. What is the motivation like there in South Florida? Because as you talk about, it's all about what FIU team am I going to see? You got the Monmouth game, and then you got you pull the victory out against Louisiana Tech, and then you have a close game with Liberty. You touched on UTEP. I think FIU should be a favorite in that, all considered after, where I made my pick'ems, as we'll get to later. But I like FIU in that game, but then you got Sam Houston right after that. Then you got New Mexico State. So you have like this roller coaster ride you could potentially go on. But I, to fall back on my original question, what's the motivation like in South Florida? And do you think 6 wins is still doable?
I do. If you beat UTEP, which is a game you're expected to win, even on the road. If you beat New Mexico State at home, which is a game you're expected to win. If you beat Kennesaw State on the road, which by virtue of them also being winless is a game that FIU will be expected to win. And I'm sorry, Jake, but if you beat Middle Tennessee to close out the season, you got your 4 wins you need to make it to a bowl game. Obviously, you're going to have a really tough matchup against Sam Houston, who has impressed just about everybody in the G5 world. They even have technically speaking, have a playoff shot if they win out and win the conference, which could easily happen. Then you have a tough contest against Jacksonville State at the beginning of the season, like the first few games, and I would have thought that was manageable for FIU. However, the Gamecocks have really heated up these past few games, so I don't know how manageable it is anymore. But no, the mindset from the start of the season was 6 wins, and it's still going to be that way. Obviously, you have those woulda, coulda, shoulda losses like Monmouth, like you had mentioned, and then Liberty in overtime. Even FAU if FIU wasn't as sloppy with the ball as they were, they probably would have beaten the Owls that game. But at the end of the day, it's been a really weird season for FIU football, but I think they're right where they need to be, where if they win the games they're expected to win, if they commit fewer and fewer turnovers, which they have been doing these past few games, and if the defense can limit the run, which they still have not completely done yet, and if FIU's own running offense can start to carry the offense more than the passing game does, which they haven't done as well, if they can work out those kinks, then you have a solid passing game with Keewan Jenkins. I believe he's second in Conference USA in passing yards and second in touchdowns behind, I believe, Veldkamp. And then you have a defense led by Travion Barnes, who leads all of Conference USA in total tackles. Things could work for FIU to get into that bowl game, which is what we really want to see after back-to-back 4-8 seasons.
I did predict at the beginning of the year, I thought that MTSU and FIU would conveniently be fighting for that 6th win in Miami, which obviously would be to the benefit of the Golden Panthers having it by virtue of it being a home game. And then seeing that the way our season has gone now, I think your chances of winning that game are much greater than I thought at the beginning of the year. So, I think there's a lot of positives to pull away from that. But Moff, we'll turn things over to WKU. You're looking a little blue today, I must add. But Hilltoppers, they dominated UTEP, but I think a lot of your attention's turned to what's going to happen this next midweek game.
Yeah, absolutely. The UTEP game, was coming off a long break since we had played Boston College and kind of had a disappointing into that game. Led the game for 56 of 60 minutes and then gave it up in the last 3 minutes. Had a long break and really didn't play our best football against UTEP. It was kind of sloppy, not as crisp as what we would like to see. Still some penalties, shooting ourselves in the foot. Kind of let them hang around in that third quarter. Second into middle of the third quarter before we pulled away. But yeah, definitely the big test coming up is going to be Sam Houston, where we have these, the kind of the 4 teams that have kind of broke away and are definitely going to be contending for that championship game spot. Now these head-to-head battles are going to start to matter when it comes down to tiebreakers and positioning in the conference. And this is the first one. And if you look on paper, man, we just look really similar. When you look at the 2 conference games we both have played, they just played UTEP and beat them 41-21. We played them and beat them 44-17. Just these 2 teams are really similar. The talent levels and the depth and just the efficiency, even just looking at points allowed and points scored throughout, their first 6 games of the season. They're just really similar on paper. Obviously, it's going to work in their favor that it's a short week, 6-day turnaround for us while they're coming off a bye. It's at their place. That's going to be another advantage for them. I'm not going to lean on either one of those facts and say, that's why if we lose, that's why we lose. You still have to line up and play this game, and it's going to be a fun one to watch. That's for sure.
I agree. I think everyone's attention will be turned to that Sam Houston Western Kentucky game. I mean, given what we've all seen from Liberty thus far in the year, I think a lot of us have we're a little wishy-washy on who the Flames really are, and I wish we had Ben from Fan the Flames to kind of speak to that a little bit. I know that he's a little skeptical at times too. So, but before we start turning our attention to this next week, I do want to take a glance at our standings with our pick'em right now. Yours truly clinging on to a lead. I can't say that enough. Truly clinging on to a lead. But you got Moff, Topper Talk, Adrian from Minor Talk, and then Jake from Pause Up Podcast, all hanging around there at 38 points, just 1 pick away from taking the lead. You got Ben, March of the Pod, at 37, as well as our friends over at GoTech, Please Don't Die. I assume Evan is making those picks. It might be Nathan, but it's GoTech, Please Don't Die at 37, tied there. Our friends over at 700 Pelham Road, Caleb at 35 points, and then Ben at the Flames podcast down to 34. So really, we're not far off from things switching up here pretty shortly, and a lot of that's going to happen this week. There's a lot of parity in the picks this week with MTSU, Kennesaw State. I don't know how everyone is picking MTSU in this game. I'll be truthful with that. So I'm very thankful for the confidence that everyone's giving, but I'm afraid you haven't seen MTSU football quite yet. But the Louisiana Tech, New Mexico State that's going on in Las Cruces looks promising. I again voted on this thinking that La Tech didn't have an offense. Truthfully, I didn't think that that Evan Bullock was going to be the quarterback of the future, but them putting up 49 points, or 48 points, albeit against the worst passing defense in Division I football. But we'll see what the Bulldogs can do on the road in Las Cruces. And then, as Moff just touched on there, you got the Western Kentucky Sam Houston State. A lot of pressure on Sam Houston to pull this one out for a lot of people. Yeah, Ben, let's hear it, man. Where's all this confidence coming from? I couldn't believe that no one picked Western besides Moff.
Yeah, I've been high on Sam Houston preseason, whole season, and I think a lot of people have. But to see that many picks is, I don't know. I mean, it puts the pressure on you. It's a big switch from last year where you were pretty much picked against in every game, and now people are picking for you every game. I don't know if it adds any pressure, but it's definitely a change of pace for us Sam Houston fans.
Absolutely. Well, lastly, to wrap up the midweek games, you got FIU on the road in El Paso facing the Miners. And yeah, unfortunately, I'm the lone Miner pick. And again, I say unfortunately, and I'll go and apologize to my fellow Jake here that, we made these picks 2 weeks ago. And La Tech, I think you guys were pretty fortunate to get a win against La Tech. I think really bad play calling is the reason that game took place the way it did. And then, I just had confidence that maybe Scotty Walden's going to finally get one, and maybe FIU is the one to do it against. But seeing the way they performed in Bowling Green this last week, my confidence in Scotty Walden and the Miners is dwindling, and is dwindling very fast. So I will go ahead and say now that I'm regretting that pick, but if it comes true, I have gained a step on everybody, as well as the New Mexico State game. I'm either, it's a make or break week for the Blue Raider podcast in the standings. So Jake, speak to that game a little bit. I know, I'm already siding with you. I'm regretting my pick, buyer's remorse, if you will, but it is a road game. There are some challenges that come along with it. And again, as the old saying goes, something has got to give. Scotty Walden and the Miners have got to get one. But tell us why this week is not that week.
FIU is favored on the road for the first time since 2018 against UTSA in the Alamo Dome. So that is interesting. I don't know. On paper, this feels like it would be an actual trap game for FIU, considering UTEP is on the downward spiral that they are. However, they're just really catching FIU at a bad time. FIU is just playing some of their best football on both offense and defense, and even through a loss, they showcase some of their best talent very well. I mean, as of right now, I feel like they have the momentum to stop any team in Conference USA, let alone the winless Miners. But I am expecting both rushing attacks to struggle in this game. But if FIU can terrorize UTEP through the air, which I expect that they will, because UTEP's secondary has been vulnerable to some big time plays, unlike their defensive front, which actually does get to the quarterback. There's not much UTEP can do in that case, especially because FIU's offensive line has greatly improved as the season goes on to give Jenkins as much time in the pocket as he can have. He was only sacked once in that Liberty game. Unfortunately, it was the final sack to end the game, the strip sack that Liberty recovered. So I think offensively, FIU has the advantage, especially because it's been reported that Cade McConnell is a game time decision. So we don't even know if he's going to play or not. And obviously UTEP utilizes that 2 QB system. So they have one player in that field down, and it's their leading passer. Actually, it's not their leading passer, but still it's their leading rusher as far as QBs goes. Actually, that's not the case at all. What I'm trying to say here is that if you run a 2 QB system and are suddenly taken out of that because one of your starters is injured, there's going to be a lot of questions surrounding UTEP's offense. So I think FIU has the advantage offensively. Defensively, I think FIU has the advantage as well because of the Panthers secondary, which has looked really, really good. I mean, pretty much any member of FIU's defensive backs room so far this season has looked great. So with the struggling passing offense that UTEP has, and Western Kentucky did a good job to expose that in their game against Bowling Green with the funny helmets. I don't know. It's been a while since we've seen FIU dominate a team on the road, but I just think this is like the perfect opportunity for them to do it. I picked a final score of 35-10.
Yeah, I think that's a safer bet than where I was 2 weeks ago. So again, another eyes there to see what FIU can do, and again get back on the win train and get closer to those 6 wins. Moff, I'll bring you back in the conversation here. Again, another midweek game with Sam Houston State. I know I'm jumping all over here, but we've already heard from Ben talk about, his case. I want to hear from you, and I'll even kick you off with a question here. Do you think that a win against Sam Houston this week is pivotal in your opportunity to play for a Conference USA championship? Because it does buy you a game in the event that you lose to Liberty later on at the end of the season.
Yeah, and I'll answer that question by saying earlier you called Liberty the number one team, and I think a lot of us were giving them the benefit of the doubt due to last season and their undefeated run and playoff or NY6 game appearance. They're just not that team this year. Their offensive line has been suspect all year. They've not been efficient. They've been in close games all year. They still have a horseshoe up their behind and win every game that they come down to the line playing, but at this point, I think the game this Wednesday is going to be for who's the number one team in the conference right now. At true power rankings, I just don't think you can call Liberty that team anymore. And absolutely, whoever wins this game this Wednesday is going to control their destiny for the rest of the season. Jacksonville State looks solid. They've definitely have turned the corner and improved the last 3 games, and Liberty just looks beatable. And quite frankly, they're going to stumble eventually in one of these close conference games. It's going to happen. It's inevitable. I wouldn't have said that at the beginning of the year. I thought they had a really good chance of going undefeated again. At this point, I could see them dropping a couple games. I don't know who it's going to be against, but I certainly think we can beat them. I think our defense has been much improved, much more aggressive. And I think our offense is just continuing to click. We have playmakers all over the field. We said that preseason. We've stayed relatively healthy so far through 6 games. It's just a wide open conference right now, and there's definitely 4 teams that can win at this point. But I think the game on Wednesday with Sam Houston and ourselves is definitely going to be the team that becomes the team to beat all of a sudden and puts themselves in a favorable position to, not only make that game, but potentially host that game.
Yeah, to add to the skepticism for the Flames too, we're really not going to have a clue how good they are. Now, we've been saying that all year because they're on a bye this week, but next week midweek game they're going to play at Kennesaw State. Then they're going to play Jacksonville State at home, again to their benefit. I don't know what Jacksonville State team we're going to see. Maybe that is the first real test for the Flames, and then they go to MTSU, they go to UMass, and then they finally face the questionable second place team in Western First, and then Sam Houston on the road. So Liberty is kind of, again, they're going to be waltzing through the conference essentially until they finally get tested at the end of the year. So yeah, I think absolutely for either team this is a must-win situation, because I think the winner of this team gets that conference bid, that conference championship bid. Ben, I'll turn it back to you. I know you've already spoken on it a tad bit, but again, just to bring back to the conversation how pivotal this game is for a bid in that championship.
Yeah, it's huge. If you win this one, I don't want to say you can afford to lose one later down the line, but whoever wins this game could almost afford to lose one game the rest of the way and maybe still get in as what would it be, a 7-1 Conference USA team. So you get that kind of advantage. And then on the Sam Houston side, I was talking to Moff about this the other night when we were recording our little segment on his show. But Sam Houston has a really big advantage for the Western Kentucky game and the Liberty game. So you come into this Wednesday game off a bye at home, and then Liberty, you play the day after Thanksgiving. They're on a short week, and they got to come to you day after Thanksgiving, probably got to fly on Thanksgiving Day. So you win this one, and the stars have really starting to align if you're a Sam Houston fan. So we'll see. Starts by winning Wednesday night, but I think whoever wins this one Wednesday is really going to be in the driver's seat.
I couldn't agree more. Again, to kind of highlight this week, you got kickoffs tomorrow. MTSU hosting Kennesaw State at 7, then Louisiana Tech, New Mexico State at 8. God, what a stinker of football for a Tuesday night. But I'm sure all eyes will be attentive to both of those games. But Wednesday night, again, I think there's a lot better football on. Western Kentucky, Sam Houston, as we've already talked about. That game kicks off at 6 p.m. Central on ESPN2. And then you got the FIU UTEP game for the late night game at 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern time on CBS Sports Network. So a lot of good football. abbreviated group with us this week, so short talk for a lot of us. But I want to bring up one more topic of discussion because there is 3 of the 4 of us are represented here. So, Moff, you'll have to cover your ears, but a little fantasy football talk, if we will. I got the standings pulled up as we're near the midway point. We've got 2 people represented here who are sitting tied atop of the fantasy football discussion. Ben 5-2, Jake Pause Up Podcast 5-2, and of course our other Ben who is not here tonight also 5-2. So they're all vying right now for that top spot as they try to break loose late here. Derek Mason's vest, that is yours truly at 4-3. So I'm just on the outside looking in. I would like to point out that my scoring is pretty good for a 4-3 record, but Ben, tell us a little bit about that strategy you got going with the fantasy football. How do you feel moving down the stretch?
Yeah, my strategy has just been get Nick Nash the ball and let him put up 40 points a game. San Jose State wide receiver, he's just been a monster. He's got 150 points through 5 games or through 6 games. So he's putting up some crazy stats. And then I've got 5 Sam Houston players on there. So thankfully the Sam Houston offense has kind of turned into a juggernaut the last few weeks. 40 points against Texas State, 41 against UTEP. Those are the last 2 games. I've really rode them pretty heavily the last few weeks. So a lot of Sam Houston offense and a lot of Nick Nash has kind of been my strategy so far.
What about you, Jake? Let's hear it, man. What's working for you and what do you look forward to?
I know you guys probably don't want to hear this, but I've just been using a lot of Sunbelt players. Honestly, my quarterbacks are Barnett from James Madison and Aguilar from App State, and they're both cooking. Like, they both look really good on their respective teams. Probably one of my best players, my best pickups was Maki Hughes, running back for Tulane. He has been just a fantasy point machine. And Trayon Sibley, I thought has been pretty good up to that FIU game where he was like a non-factor, so that pissed me off because I had him starting. I thought it was going to do really good. Luke Beebe for UAB was also a great pickup on my end. I have been doing a lot of changing and mixing around with wide receivers here and there, but I'm happy with the list I have right now. Hurst from Georgia State, Vandeross from Toledo, and Winston Wright Jr. from East Carolina, and as my flex player, Noah Short from Army has turned into such a great pickup because Army has just been absolutely killing it on the run, and he's been one of the leading factors in that. I thought I would be using more Western Kentucky defense this season. However, I've really been leaning towards Tulane, and that's been working out better for me. And then kicking wise, it's funny. I started with Karhu from Liberty, but I've since gone with Pavon from Sam Houston, and he's done me pretty good so far.
Yeah, he's been solid. Everybody forgot about Colby Sessoms. He's been hurt the whole year.
I know.
Mm-hmm. Well, I myself have been a waiver merchant, if you will. I've been very fortunate to pick up Army on the defensive side. I mean, they've been one of the top 5 G5 defenses in fantasy points, that is. I'm not sure from a statistical category standpoint, but that's been a huge pickup for me. Harold Fannin, the tight end from Bowling Green, the number 1 tight end prospect going into the NFL draft this upcoming year, at least from the G5 ranks. Again, I don't know too much about P4, but I don't know who dropped him. I do remember having him pinned on draft day, and someone dropped him. I immediately picked him up, and he's been the number 1 G5 tight end all season. So that's been a no-brainer. And then I took a chance at Gio Lopez, the redshirt freshman quarterback from South Alabama. That team has put up a lot of points, but as they get into conference play, things have slowed down. So I'm hoping Vadiato picks some things up this week against Kennesaw State and gets the quarterback scoring. But I've been kind of a waiver merchant when it comes to running backs. So you kind of do what you can and see what matchups work for you to pull out a W. But to get Moff into this conversation, I think you'll be surprised to hear that Caden Velkamp hasn't even he's still sitting on the waiver wire. No one's got interest on Velkamp. Why would that be?
That's insane to me. I mean, especially Finley was voted the 2nd best quarterback in the league by our group, and Caden was in our top 5, if I'm not mistaken, our top 10 at least, which is wild, to be and unsure if he was even going to start. But I do want to chime in on the fantasy football because I'm not playing. I've tried to distance myself from fantasy football over the last few years, but you pulled up those standings. I just couldn't help but notice our friend over at Liberty, superfan Jeremiah, down there at 1-6. Jeremiah, get it together, buddy.
And he wears Ben out, doesn't he?
Yeah, get it together, Jeremiah. And he tells me I look weird in blue. I still look good though. And then I see this, and I text him about it, and he says, "Oh, I haven't even looked at that in a few weeks. Give me a break, buddy." Come on, man. You know what you're doing. You're loaded up with Liberty players. Guarantee it. They're underperforming. 1-6. Get it together.
Oh,
I couldn't agree more. It makes the irony even better just because of how much he wears on Ben about the pick'em standing. So yeah, Jeremiah is not clear of the doghouse himself. But yeah, Caden Velcamp, top 20 quarterback in G5, at least in our pool. So again, he's been there for a couple weeks now. I would be lying if I said I hadn't thought about it. Tyler Huff's another one that's been putting up numbers in his few weeks of action that has been sitting there on the waiver wire. So, you know, he's there for the taking if Jeremiah is wise enough to get more active on his fantasy football. But guys, appreciate everyone tuning in this week. Of course, Conference USA Roundtable. Follow us on Twitter. We've got all the content for you. We keep everything retweeted over there so that way you're always up to date on everything Conference USA from all of us. Everyone here, I can confidently say, are pretty active with their podcasts. You got stuff on a weekly basis. I know Pause Up does written content as well. They do a great job covering everything. Moff obviously does everything with Western, and Ben, I know things are rolling into basketball, and you got all the bases covered. So I'm pretty happy with our all-star team we got here tonight. So again, I appreciate everyone tuning in, and hopefully we'll have some action for basketball on that topic in 2 weeks from today. We'll have a little recorded episode, and the Roundtable will be back again to talk a Conference USA football. But until next time, we will see you then.